Okay. Looks like we're live. Anybody listening? Hold on. I just gotta. We're live. And we are, of course, only good looking young people on this channel, so. Oh, meeting is active. Hold on, hold on. Uh, what the hell? Okay, I see a second participant. Oh, okay. Sorry, Chero. I had this admit thing going on. Uh, I didn't know that how I had this set up, but should be okay now. There's Chiro. Hi, Chiro.
Hey, Paul, can you hear me?
Yeah, but bit of an echo, but I can hear you.
Don't know why. No, I don't understand why the echo, but um, yeah, I tried connecting earlier, but I couldn't.
Yeah, I think I had this set up wrong. I have to
Okay,
admit each participant,
I got you.
uh, and then I saw there were two participants. I said, well, I clicked on that, and oh, there's Chiro. Okay, so I'm still kind of learning this.
Zoom.
Well, Zoom and OBS,
Oh, how they work together.
and well, OBS is actually pretty good, I think.
Yeah.
Uh, it's just that it has a lot of features. You have to.
Right.
It does have a couple of quirks. Like sometimes when you come bring it up, the windows aren't populated, and you have to kind of go in and poke it to get it to bring everything up.
Right.
But right now we are going out, and let me see if I can.
Anybody else joining us?
Anybody who wants to. Uh, Let me see if I can get this to work. Not OBS. Zoom. Okay. So there's a waiting room, and what can I do? I can make you the host. I can. Okay. But I can't force your video to the front, apparently. At least not the way. I'm still learning this technique. There's a chat and a participants window up, and I'm trying to make that so you can see that. Hold on a second. Well, you can, you probably can't see it, but in OBS,
Let's see.
no, I don't know how to make that happen.
I can see. I can see both of our screens side by side, but I'm unable to. I seem to be unable to enlarge one of us.
Well, yeah, I can't do it either. Whoever's talking apparently comes to the front.
Should be, but it's not happening.
Oh, you're in the front now.
Okay, so that's your view. My view is if I speak, I see um, the frame highlighted,
Let me see if
and
I can. Hold on a second.
it's a little
Uh,
where I see it anyway.
Gallery view. Let's try that. There's gallery view. I like
Maybe
that better.
maybe I have to change my own settings. Maybe.
Well, if you go to view and I don't meeting, you got meeting. There's different. There's speaker view and gallery view. Those are your two choices, I think.
I don't seem to have those choices, believe it or not.
In Zoom.
Yeah.
Uh,
I can only see. Let's see here. Oh, you speaking? Okay, I got a button that says speaker view.
is
Let's
this
see.
the PC app?
Yes. Well, yes, because it auto launched. It auto launched the PC app for me from Firefox. So I have no. I didn't really have a choice in the matter, so to speak.
Oh, okay. Well, you should. Yeah, I have. I would think the Mac and PC apps are very similar.
So,
Uh,
so I have speaker view. So now speaker view, you're on the okay. Maybe that's what I need. There was one button, speaker view. I clicked on it, and now you're on the forefront. So I don't
yeah.
know. You're still on the forefront anyway. Even if I speak, you're
I
the
will see
one.
what. See how OBS is handling it gracefully. Uh, Now, when more people join, there should be each of us will get a smaller square in
Right.
gallery view.
Gallery view now. The focus, the person that speaks for focus, I have a highlighted frame around my picture, and if you speak, your picture has an highlighted frame, but they stay the same size. They don't change sizes.
Right. Yeah. Well, the size will change if there's more people.
Okay, okay, that makes sense.
Because
Makes sense.
I've had, well, the one I did with Daniela a couple weeks ago
Yeah.
was that was I decided to use, I didn't use gallery view. I used speaker view
Okay.
because there were so many people,
Oh wow, really?
and I wanted whoever was on to have a bigger part of the screen.
Is that the
Yeah.
one from that she did from England? I mean, from
Well,
Scotland?
Scotland. Yeah, she
Okay.
and a few other people were in Scotland, and
Ah,
but the radio guys were in Italy,
oh, interesting.
and they um, and they had a lot of stuff to show us. They had images and stuff. So when they were on, I wanted them to be big, and if it didn't happen automatically, I would just force it to be that. So because they were what they were doing is bouncing images off the moon,
Right.
and so I would bring up a view in OBS where they could see the full image, and then I'd
Okay.
switch back to the main scene, which was the Zoom conference,
Right.
and uh, with my face up way up in the upper left hand corner, very small, and what I did was I would have when the radio guys were on and they were showing the images, I would force that to be the primary screen in Zoom, and uh, they those guys did a great job. They had the images up on their. They were doing a screen share,
Okay.
and the screen share, they would bring up a window with the image in it that had been bounced off the moon, and I was able to show a pretty good view of that in the live thing. The only thing is, my original intention was to turn that into an audio podcast, and I have not figured out how to turn something that visual
Huh.
into
Uh,
audio. Uh,
might lose its significance.
yeah, well, I mean, uh, I think what I'm going to do is it'll take me hours, but I have to go through and snip out key parts of the audio
Yeah.
and put that into an episode somehow.
Mhm.
So it's not I haven't plunged into that task because it's going to be very intense.
Did you record it on video? I mean, I guess what I'm saying is that did you record the stream and did you post it anywhere yet? I didn't know if, for sure if whether or not you had posted it already or not.
Well, I recorded everything. Yeah.
What is it on YouTube already?
Oh yeah, it's on YouTube.
Oh,
And I also have. Well, the thing is, there's four ways to make an audio recording. This thing, OBS can record,
yeah.
Zoom can record,
Okay.
YouTube records,
Right, right, right.
and I can record the audio separately on Reaper. So I
Okay.
had uh, lots of choices for audio. I mistakenly did not start Reaper soon enough, and also some of the audio was not going out because of a mistake I made
Hmm.
earlier on, and so what happened was that I had about 2 minutes of audio missing at the beginning. So I went back and took the Zoom recording,
Okay.
and that was fine. Well, it wasn't great, but it was good enough,
Oh,
and pasted it back in. So and then I put that back underneath the video, and now the video that's up there is got all the audio in it, uh, and all the video. But most of the people that watched that video watched it live.
right.
Over 200 people. So
That's pretty good. I
yeah,
couldn't
it
make
was
it,
my
unfortunately.
best. Well, I'm gonna admit to a dirty little secret. I paid Facebook $20 to
Promotion.
promote the
Okay.
link.
Well, sometimes it's worth, every now and then. There's nothing wrong with it, I guess. It's
I am not happy with Facebook's link promotion. Well,
yeah,
it's not so much the money. The money is actually not too bad.
yeah.
It's cheaper than a promoted tweet. Promoted tweets start at $50 to go on.
Wow. I was
Oh
not
yeah,
aware of that.
and I've had bad results from promoted tweets, so I generally am not encouraged to use that anymore.
Uh,
But the problem is they give you a very limited set of choices for audience.
uh,
Basically, you can pick age, gender, and location, and then you can rule out some things, which none of which are helpful.
huh.
So yeah, they got along with. That's not very good. Uh, I mean, I'm sure they make a ton of money on promoted Facebook posts every month. There must be thousands and thousands of those,
Hmm.
and
Who knows how the promotional algorithm works, though?
yeah.
With as far as them, let's say you make a selection on age. So how, well, I suppose people post their
Well,
birthday,
the age ranges
right?
of there are very broad. You don't have a lot
Right.
of discrepancy. But I mean, I don't really. I want a wide age range. I don't.
Right.
I don't. I want anyone who's old enough to understand what we're talking about to be able to
Yeah.
watch,
Yeah.
and
Yeah.
anybody older than that. So that's not important to me.
Right.
Gender, I want both men and women.
Exactly. Okay.
That doesn't make any difference. Uh, Geographically, I like to have the whole planet.
Yeah.
But the problem is that I turned on here. This is a big beef with Facebook. I I said let's turn on Europe.
Mm-hmm.
Let's do Europe, and every nearly all the hits I got were from southeastern Europe. Like you know,
Huh.
not anything against those people, but why aren't
Like,
I getting hits from northwestern Europe or
like Greece, Italy, France, Spain.
well, like Bulgaria,
Oh, the actual,
Albania,
like, okay. Wow.
Romania? A lot of names that are very difficult to pronounce and spell.
Okay. So, like, I get you. Like former
But
Yugoslavia republics and all.
almost no one from France or Germany or the UK or Netherlands or Belgium. And I go, why is it all concentrated in this part of Europe? Is that because it's cheaper for them to get clicks there? I don't know what it is, but the bias there was so strong that
That's really
I
weird, though.
started to wonder if maybe I was feeling not now. I'm sure there's lots of wonderful people in that area,
All right.
but
I wonder if it was
uh,
a real coincidence or there's some reason or there was some actual reason behind it.
I think there is a reason, but I just don't know what it is because
Well,
it was too
intentional or
obvious.
some sort of algorithm glitch. You know what I mean?
Well,
Like,
it could be that there are click farms in those areas too.
uh, well,
Now, you know about click farms, right?
yeah, yeah, yeah,
People who get paid to just sit there on a computer and click on things.
yeah. Yeah, but
And
which farms are for profit, though, obviously.
yeah, well, there's a whole episode of Silicon Valley that's focused on uh, the dubious practice of buying clicks.
Right.
Uh, and one of the characters decided to promote their website, they would buy like 500,000 clicks. And so they do.
Mm.
And it makes their numbers go way up.
Right,
But
right,
but
right.
then it doesn't take very much detective work to figure out that it's bogus. And
Yeah,
so
yeah. Well, they got the entire, um, enterprises in some countries. They showed a documentary. Where did I see that? Maybe on the web, maybe on YouTube. I don't know. There was a documentary about review factories. You know what review factories they have for
yeah.
Amazon reviews?
Yeah.
Where
Oh, you go to through Amazon reviews, and
yeah,
you can kind of pick out the ones that are.
well, the thing is that these enterprises, I think they were in China or something. Anyway, they what they do is that they have all these products, so they have actual people buying them, but it's almost like it's almost a close loop of they buy the product and they do the review and they can spin, like thousands of reviews, so they come out as being verified, but
Yeah.
because they really buy the products, but they bought the products to be able to do in return do the good reviews on the product. So they've come up with these elaborate schemes to kind of go and take advantage of the loopholes, if you want.
Yeah. Well, I mean, if you pay people enough to buy the product and then provide us a review,
Right,
of
something
course
like
it's
that.
going to be a 5-star review. But you can't afford to do that for more than a few of those.
Well, they
Uh,
got this. Well, but also the other they do all kind of things. I forgot all the details, but another one they do is they recycle. I think this is another weakness or loophole in the Amazon review system. But actually, it's not the Amazon review system. Is the well, I guess it is. You sometimes you see reviews. They're kind of quote unquote recycled reviews. They are for different product. So
well, yeah.
what
I
they
mean,
do is
why?
they hijack the product page, something to that extent.
Yeah. Well, a lot of them are just like, great product. I loved it. Uh, works for me. And
But
then,
I've seen products, I've seen reviews for the wrong product at
oh
times.
yeah, I've seen that too.
So that's
But
what
I
they
think
do.
that some of those may be just problems with the review system, but bugs in the
Yeah,
software. But you can tell when somebody actually owns it and likes it and has used it, and they will be willing to write more than a couple of lines about it.
yeah.
Uh, and oh, Rock Howard's here.
Oh, cool.
Sorry, Rock, I didn't. He's connecting to audio. More people will show up eventually. I,
Oh.
I'll let you guys talk, and I'm going to go off and promote this a little bit more.
I might not be aware of it. I wonder if Nick even knows we're online. Well, he's been having issues though. You heard about his fire, right? Did you hear about that?
Which fire?
I think it was his sister home or was it his home or was his sister living in his home? I forgot the details, but he posted it on his blog page. So he had a house fire basically, and he was able to save the house, but there was a lot of damage apparently, and he wrote about it on his Green Annex blog site.
Oh,
Yeah,
no, I guess I missed that.
yeah.
Rock, can you hear us? Hello?
I see a mute.
Oh, you have your mic is muted.
It's muted. Yeah.
I'm gonna unmute you. Okay. Now, okay, you're muted on your side. Can you hear me? You can go in the chat and say I can hear you or something like that.
All right, how about now?
Oh,
Yeah.
much better. Yeah.
Super.
Loud and
How you
clear.
doing, guys?
Hey, Rock, how you
Good.
doing?
I'm doing great.
Nice to meet you, by the way. I've seen you online. Never got the chance to talk before. I'm a long
Good.
time. What used to be on the former defunct Unseen podcast with Paul.
Yeah. Chiro was on quite a few of those.
Yeah, I heard a few.
In fact,
I'm just a long time astronomy fanboy. I got a degree in astronomy back in the mid 70s.
Nice.
Kind of followed it ever since.
What part of the country are you from, Rock?
Well, I grew up in Georgia. I went to college at Caltech
And where do you live now?
in Austin, Texas.
Oh, you're in Texas.
Oh.
Okay.
Caltech's a cool school. I wanted to go there, but I wasn't clever enough.
It was too hard for me, but I managed to get a degree.
Yeah. I was not a good enough student to go to someplace like Caltech. You had to be focused.
I think that one of the reasons I got in off the waiting list. And one of the reasons I think I got in is because when I was in high school, I co-discovered a star.
Nice.
I was a lunar occultation, and I spotted a secondary star, and later somebody confirmed my observation. So
cool.
kind of my astronomy claim to fame.
Yeah, I wish had done that.
Are you a professional astronomer, Rock?
No, never have been. I got my degree, and I met a whole bunch of professional astronomers and famous physicists at Caltech.
Okay.
But I convinced myself my math wasn't so good. So I've been slinging code for 40 plus years.
Nice.
But I'd like to get back into it when I retire from coding. I have some various plans for getting back into astronomy on some level.
Okay.
Cool. Well, I think there's probably a lot of stories like yours of people. They develop the analytical skills studying astronomy, but then don't make a living at it because very few people do.
Well, now there's so much coding involved with astronomy, and Python has been something I've specialized in for almost 15 years, and that's a very favorite language for a lot of astronomy work.
Oh yeah, I think that's the dominant language.
So I think I can easily find a place where I can contribute.
Yeah, I want to learn Python. I know a little bit of it, but I haven't really written any code professionally in probably 30 years, and that was in C. Which,
I
by the way, is C is one of those things where it's enough rope to hang yourself.
Oh, I love C. But it's like you can't be as productive as you need to be in the modern day if you use a low-level language like that. So
yeah, well, I mean, I know people who write real-time software, and they're still using C and C++.
You'd be surprised. So much of the supercomputer work for astronomy is still based on 30-year-old Fortran, and rewriting it just doesn't make sense because of the incredible optimization that goes into those Fortran codes. It's amazing.
Yeah. Well, when I was in college, all my professors were writing their code in Fortran. And
That's what I started with.
Submitting card decks to the computing center.
I did that. My first class was Fortran, and it was card decks. Yeah, I remember those days. Fortunately, those days went away really fast for me, so I caught the tail end of it, though.
Yeah, I remember. Well, I was a freshman in 1976, and that was we were doing. I was absolutely terrible with the key punch machine. I just too clumsy. I've always been clumsy, and I just couldn't. And of course, we didn't have anybody that could do it for us, so. That was it was a disaster. Yeah, and what you do, you submit your card, and then like 20 minutes later, somebody would put a printout in a box, and you go to the box to get your printout, and you realize the mistake you made, and then you go back and find the card where the mistake is, and then do it again. Boy, that's a slow loop.
Yep.
Yeah, these days, if I needed to calculate something, I'll use R, which is free. That's the main reason I use it. It's actually pretty good, and R is, there's nothing very sophisticated about it, but it has a huge library of functions. So,
right,
many of which are really sweet, do things for you that you think any programming language should do, like, and very fast. So it's good enough for me. It wouldn't be.
Yeah, it's a good choice for a lot of data crunching and particularly numeric stuff.
Yeah, I mean,
and graphics.
I have
kinds of graphics.
I have a thing on GitHub with all my R code. It's probably write only, but it's cool. I've been using it to look at the light curves for Boyagi and Star, and recently Betelgeuse. Although it looks like the excitement of Betelgeuse is over. So,
well, actually, I have. I'll give you my take on Betelgeuse for what I think is going to happen right now.
Okay.
First off, I don't think it's going to explode, sadly.
Yeah, that seems to be the consensus. Yeah.
But interestingly, today, February 21st, was the estimated minimum for the multi-year cycle. That Betelgeuse apparently has a long-term cycle of almost around 4 years, plus or minus. I forget what the exact number is.
Yeah.
And today was the minimum for that long-term 4-year cycle. In the last few cycles, the magnitude difference has been between 0.25 and 0.5 for that long-term cycle. And of course, the current dip was a lot more than that.
Yeah.
So I think what we're going to see is a slight rise over the next, I'll say 2 months, but it could be 1 month, back to about 1.3. And that'll be kind of coming out of this multi-year minimum. But from my view of the pictures, it just looks like it did, in fact, eject a whole bunch of dust or else ran into a dust lane. And therefore, most of the photons are being lost from dust. And I don't think that's going to change. So I'll be surprised if it gets much brighter than 1.3 anytime soon.
Well, hopefully they'll get some infrared observations to be able to confirm that.
Yeah, I'm waiting for the papers. The guy who did the photos and released the photos recently, he and his compatriots are working on their papers, and he told me they were still a few weeks away from actually publishing, but that it did include some infrared observations. So I'm waiting for that too. Here's the thing: Betelgeuse is moving really fast across the sky. It's unexplainably so. Nobody has a good story for how such a big star is moving so fast. So, it is what, 20 times the mass of the sun. Usually, if you have a situation where stars interact and pick up a lot of speed, it's the smaller stars that get all the speed, and the big stars might get some. But in this case, Betelgeuse is just screaming across the sky away from that Orion area where it presumably was created. There hasn't really been a good explanation for it. But there is one thing that's clear. There are some dust lanes unrelated to Betelgeuse nearby that it's going to be entering soon. And when I say soon, I mean like within the next 10,000 years. And it could have just encountered a finger from that particular dust lane that's just extended and is blocking our view. I mean, this could be just it entering a phase where it's going to be partially obscured from us for a long time. So it's very interesting kind of thing to study. There's so many facets to the story, because Betelgeuse has been studied so much for over 100 years.
Yeah, well, that should be observable, right? I mean, the dust around it should be warming up. So
Right. If it's nearby, it should be warming up, and that'll be very interesting to see. Presumably, it's cold right now, or else it wouldn't be having the dramatic effect of sucking in all of those photons from what looks to be like half of the star.
yeah, it's dramatic. So yeah, there is a possibility that it somehow just sneaks way behind that dust lane and doesn't warm it up much, and you wouldn't see it. But
Now, here's my fun little sidebar kind of hypothesis and hope. Craig Wheeler, of course, who is a professor emeritus who retired recently from UT, he and his students have been studying Betelgeuse very strongly for a number of years, and he has a theory that he put forward that Betelgeuse actually swallowed another star some time back. We know that it has a couple of small companion stars near it now, but he thinks that it's possible it may have swallowed one already. And that would be contributing to the fact that it's so darn lumpy. And we know something dramatic happened because it's spinning so fast and moving so fast. So that's a possibility. Now, I don't know if you caught the paper by the kid from Sweden, the adjunct, with his theory about superluminous supernovas.
no,
He put together, this just came out about a month ago. His theory was that supernova 2006 GY, which is about 1,000 times brighter than a typical supernova, his theory on it is that it wasn't, in fact, a supermassive star exploding like most people think, but instead it was a red giant that had swallowed a white dwarf. Now, that shouldn't happen very often if you think about it, but that's
No.
his theory, is you had a red giant that swallowed a white dwarf, and then the white dwarf went and kept sucking in matter from the red giant from within and hit the Chandrasekhar limit, and basically it was a type 1A style supernova. But when it exploded, it had all of this material nearby from the star and from what the star had emitted to the surrounding area. And all of that material blew up as part of the explosion. And that's why it was 1,000 times brighter. So I don't know if this theory is really catching on with a lot of other astronomers, but I think it's freaking brilliant. And it occurs to me that we may have a scenario very similar to this with Betelgeuse. It's entirely possible that Betelgeuse, when it blows up, could be 100 or 1,000 times brighter than people are anticipating.
well,
Which would be pretty exciting.
we'll find out.
Well, I hope we'll be around to find out. That would be nice.
Well, when I say we, I mean hopefully some descendant of
Some
humanity.
Some leftover.
Well, some intelligent being from our planet.
Somewhere in the galaxy we'll see it.
Yep.
Yeah. Oh, by the way, speaking of astronomy, I have some news that I don't know if you know. You probably don't know, Chiro, but this week I started working on James Webb Space Telescope
Oh,
as an
Nice.
engineer.
nice.
And now I'm not doing anything glamorous. I'm not doing anything really, really hyper technical. I'm just another shoulder to the wheel trying to get this telescope ready to fly. But
Are you still in your home base? I mean, are you still working the same location or?
well, actually, I moved to like a mile. I'm now at the main campus of Goddard.
Okay.
I was working off campus at a special, like a satellite facility that they had, which I didn't like at all. And I've been there for several years, and I realized this is not my kind of work.
Right.
And I kept looking and looking and looking, and finally, some guy I knew from a past job popped up and said, "Hey, I got something," and so I said, "Well, what do you got?" "Well, we got lots of things. Come on over. We'll talk about it." And the first thing that came up was the James Webb Space Telescope. I said, look, I'll sweep the floors on James Webb Space Telescope. I'll empty the trash cans. I get to work on this.
That's nice.
So I have a tiny little cubicle in the back of an environmental test facility. So it's noisy, but I'm happy to be on it. I'm happy to do that.
I'm sure it's exciting.
Yeah, we're mostly in Building 7, which is actually Building 7 is an environmental test facility with some offices. But it turns out over the years, the offices have evolved to be most of the James Webb program, including Mather, who is Nobel Prize winner and the chief scientist for the program. Do you know what I'm talking about? I think his first name is Stephen Mather. Oh, let me bring up my gsfc.jwst.
Oh, he was what was it?
.nasa.gov. I'm sorry, it's the other way around. jwst.gsc. Yeah, if you look under Meet the Team there.
What page are you referring to? At the
John Mather. Sorry, not Stephen. He's the lead scientist for James Webb.
Okay.
He is a Nobel Prize winner for his work on WMAP.
Oh.
And COBE.
Oh, he did Cosmic Background.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah. But now he's moved on to James Webb.
Okay.
Since 1995. Since 1995, he's been the senior project scientist.
Okay. Yeah.
His office is like a stone's throw from mine.
Do you like? Are you working close to his team, or? I mean.
Well, I work on the systems engineering team, which is what I've always done.
Yeah.
My whole career, and we're trying to just make sure that now the observatory is out in California right now.
Oh yeah. Okay.
It's not. There were major parts of it at Goddard at one point. It went through a big testing campaign. That's done. Uh-huh. It's now in California. Now the thing is so big and so complicated.
I can imagine that.
that they could not do thermal vacuum testing on the whole thing.
Okay.
So they've done it in pieces, but that's all done. Actually, they do what they call cryo vacuum testing, because the telescope assembly will be in incredibly cold temperatures for its entire existence up there. It won't cycle that much. Hopefully it won't cycle at all, actually, but it'll go from hot to cold and stay cold. But everything has to operate there in extremely cold temperatures. And they even added a cryo cooler to make it even colder.
Wow.
Well, because if you want super sensitive infrared at medium wavelengths, that's where heat is, right? And in the real world, heat is in medium and near infrared wavelengths.
Yeah.
So they have this massive, extremely complex sun shield that keeps all the sunlight off from warming it up, and then and keeps stray light out too, and then they have this incredibly complicated system of coolers that keeps everything cooled down, because what they call the MIRI instrument, the mid infrared instrument.
Okay.
That thing has to be really cold to get super sensitive measurements. Which if you have a giant telescope, you want your instrument to be really sensitive, not just be amplifying heat. So they get that really cold. So I analogize it to I don't know if you remember the McDonald's used to have this thing called the McDLT, They have the styrofoam container, and they say we keep the hot side hot and the cold side cold. That's exactly what they're doing with James Webb. There's a side that faces the sun, where none of the sensitive science stuff is, and it's basically gathering power from the sun and communicating with the Earth. And then there's the other side, which is where all the really super sophisticated instruments are that cost $10 billion, and they're kept it very, ranging from extremely cold to just cold temperatures.
So I imagine that there's some sort of sophisticated layer in between.
Yeah, that's the sun shield. The sun shield is one of the most complex thermomechanical things ever devised by the human race. It is. It doesn't. It just looks like just this big tennis court sized multi-layer set of sheets, but to get them folded up inside the launch vehicle and then deployed out to protect the telescope from the sun is turns out to be a huge enterprise.
Is it almost like it's almost on furloughs, like solar arrays?
Well, it's actually way more complex than a solar array.
Okay.
A solar array deploys very simply and easily. Pop, 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 and it's out. And the solar array that on James Webb is a very conventional one. It's not doing anything different or special. But same thing, people have flown hundreds and hundreds of times. But the sun shield is...
It's like origami in space.
It's like what? Sorry?
It's like origami in space.
Well, yeah, I mean, I don't really understand everything they're doing yet. I mean, there's a lot of mechanisms that are driving it that take this folded up sun shield and drive it out slowly but carefully until it's fully extended, and then it has to be a tension on it. You can't have it floppy.
Yeah.
It's got to have a pretty tense, because if it's floppy, you'll have these low frequency movements, right? Which would be bad when you're trying to point a telescope very precisely. It's got to be nice and tight and tense. So it has to go way out and then tighten up without getting it too tight so that it doesn't break, right? And there are other issues with it. It's really very complicated, but it's multi-layered, and it comes out and then goes up, so the layers separate a bit.
I see. I'm looking at it real time. I mean, I'm looking at the image of it as you at a graphic, of course. But I can see the layering. There's it seems to be like 5 layers of material that are stacked, right, with the gap in between them.
And when it's fully deployed, it's very large.
Yeah.
And it allows us to point the telescope over, so that at any given time we can see about 39% of the sky. In other words, you can turn the telescope, and you can also move the spacecraft a little bit if you have to, and it not only blocks the light from the sun from getting into the telescope, it also blocks the heat from that light from getting into the infrared. Because James Webb is, oh, there you go. Yeah, all right.
Yeah. I'm trying the share function for the first time. So this is a picture of it, right?
Yeah, that's what it looks like. That is it. That's a picture of it, yeah. That's the flight one.
Yeah.
And you have to understand that telescope is that yellow thing.
Uh-huh.
That gold thing actually,
right,
is big.
Well, that's not everything that's not all the gold. There's more to it when it.
Yeah, there's you can't see the wings that are back there.
Right.
They fold forward, but
this is
there you go. Yeah. It's
Yeah.
huge. It's 6 meters.
I got to see a full size replica. Oh gosh, 5
So
years
it's like
ago.
3 times the height of Wilt Chamberlain. Well,
yeah.
when he was alive. Uh, it's really very, very big, and it's by far the biggest space telescope ever. And not even nothing even close to it. And Hubble is much smaller. Yeah, that's a good picture there. You can see,
Yeah. The size.
You can see how big it is, for real. I mean, it's big.
Really, I kind of like. Is that the same material as a sail?
No, it's very complex, multi-layered material.
Yeah.
It was designed for thermal properties primarily.
It's a serve a different purpose than a solar sail.
Yeah.
Right?
I've yet to dig into all the details of that, but I will have to at some point.
Right.
And yeah,
solar sails are designed to be lightweight,
of course.
but as I understand it, James Webb is designed to dissipate heat.
Yeah,
it's probably reject heat, basically.
Right.
Yeah. Yeah. Now the picture they show you, all the pictures you will see of James Webb show the telescope, but really, if you are to actually fly up there and look at it, it would be dark because there'd be no sun on it. The sun stays. The way they're doing this, they're going to put it out at Earth Sun L2, which is it's got its back to the sun all the time.
It's going to L2.
L2, yeah. So it's going to have its back to the sun and to the Earth the whole time, which is great because it means there's one side of the spacecraft that can communicate with the Earth, which is something you have to do a lot. And there's one side of the spacecraft that's going to have no sun on it that will be able to see a lot of dark sky. It's going to be the best dark sky ever. Hubble, if you look at Hubble has so many constraints because Hubble has to avoid the Earth. It has to not only the sun. Yeah, avoiding the sun is only one constraint, but Hubble has to avoid the Earth because it's a low Earth orbiting satellite, and so Hubble also has to avoid the velocity vector because all the air rushing in. So even at very low densities, it's a problem. So they have a cone that they can observe in at a given time, and the cone is moving because the orbit's moving around the Earth. So Hubble is much more constrained. This is going to be a much less constrained, and every 6 months they're going to have full view of the entire sky.
What are the current timelines, Paul, as far as the actual launch? I haven't been following.
Well, the official launch date, and I should say no more, is March 2021, which is about a year from now.
Yeah.
There may be a decision made to extend that a little bit, not a lot. But
the hot rumor, I know you can't talk about it, but the hot rumor is it'll actually be the following July.
Well, there's
a more likely date.
Yeah, there's all kinds of dates.
That's the hot rumor.
There's all kinds of dates floating around in the press. I don't have I mean, even if I could tell you what I've heard, it wouldn't.
Of course not. Yeah.
It wouldn't be. It's not like years. It's months. And there are some problems that need to get fixed before it goes up, because they are being extremely cautious. They don't want to. This thing costs so much money,
and it's a one shot.
It's a one shot. You're never
fixing it's not an option.
It's you've heard the old saw, better, faster, cheaper, pick any two. Well, in this case, it's pick one, which is better, right? Faster and cheaper are not on the table. It's now Congress wants it launched, but if it gets launched in fiscal year 2021, and there's no, or even early in fiscal year 2022, there's no need to allocate vast amounts more money to get it launched. Once it's launched, you spent pretty much all the money you could spend. And the marching army, which includes myself, gets a lot smaller. You still have lots of graduate students, but they work cheap. And so you'll have ground you'll have people doing all kinds of work, but not on the satellite. The satellite's launched. You can't do anything with it. It takes it about a month to get from launch out to its station, and during that time they're going to deploy the sun shield, because it takes 20 I think it's 20 days to cool down the near infrared camera, which the near infrared, just the near infrared camera takes 20 days to cool down. It's a passively cooled system, and so they want to get that out and so they can give it time to cool down. Then they're going to get out there and get into L2, basically an orbit around L2, and then they're going to start commissioning. And the commissioning, they think, is going to take about 6 months. And NIRCam will be one of the first ones that they commission, and they'll do the near infrared, and then they'll do the medium infrared, and the first light images will probably be pretty amazing. The public ones anyway. There may be some pretty ugly ones before that, but
hopefully not like Hubble, man. I worked at Lockheed when the first Hubble stuff came back, and the realization came that the mirror was misfigured.
Yeah, well,
that was not happy. I didn't have anything. Lockheed was a big company back then, and my work had nothing to do with that particular mission. But boy, that was so disappointing at the time.
It was, yeah. And you know what? That lesson I think has been learned. We'll find out. But this mirror is much more complex than Hubble. They can tweak it. So the wavefront,
is it actually dynamic while it's operating, or is it just something they can tweak like between runs?
My understanding is it doesn't have a high bandwidth control. It's a very low bandwidth.
That would make sense.
Yeah. But they'll take an image and say, well, yeah, we got it. The wavefront's not quite right. Let's my guess is that when it first deploys, it will be pretty good, but we're talking about infrared, right? The margins are a little bit bigger because the wavelengths are longer, but still, they're not, like a few microns is not that much, but to get to a half wavelength at 2 microns is a lot easier than getting a half wavelength at half a micron. But they will get the wavefront as accurate as they can get it, and they will keep tweaking it. It will take a few months to get everything perfect before, and they already have an early science campaign approved, and they'll start on that early science campaign as soon as they can, and those observers are all chomping at the bit to get their data.
I follow a lot of astronomers on Twitter, and when the latest call for proposals for JWST projects went out a few weeks ago, a bunch of them put up comics of Lucy pulling the football away from Charlie Brown.
Yeah,
they've been through that before.
Yeah, well, it's one of these. Some programs slip a month every month. This one's slipping like a day every month. So it's getting it's starting to converge.
Okay, good.
And the launcher is Arianespace, and there was good news recently from Arianespace. They have modified the vehicle that they were going to launch on, but they now just did a successful launch with that same vehicle. So, and they've got a couple more coming up over the next year or so. So they have. There's good reason to believe that vehicle will be ready, really ready to fly when it's time to put by the time we ship it out there to Kourou. It turns out that even just the movement on the ship as it's being taken out there is something that we have to account for.
This is the predicted Ariane configuration.
Yeah.
Apparently, with the payload up.
Yeah, it's deceptive. It looks deceptively small on top of that big rocket, but
Right.
it's um it's about what 15,000 pounds. It's big.
Yeah.
Uh,
Well, this is a big rocket itself, so
it is one of the bigger rockets currently operational.
exactly. So
Uh, yeah, I think it's not as big as Falcon Heavy, but it's still pretty big. And yeah, it has.
actually,
You can see how it's folded up in there.
yeah, yeah.
It's really folded up tight.
Yeah.
And believe me, there has been enormous amounts of analysis to
Regarding the,
verify that all that fits and none of it contacts during the launch.
yeah,
Well, there's a lot of vibration and noise during the launch,
sure.
and it can make things shake and rattle and roll quite a bit. So the very next, well, not the very next, but something we're going to do this year is going to be to shake, rattle, and roll the whole entire observatory, all as one piece,
Oh, nice.
to verify that all that stuff, stays tight and packed
Right.
up where it's supposed to be.
Stress test.
Including, and this is not a test. This is not a test article. This is the actual flight spacecraft,
Yeah.
the actual $10 billion spacecraft
Yeah.
that's going to be vibrated. So people are working extremely hard to make sure that we don't do anything stupid, because you could do something stupid during a
Sure.
campaign like that. Fortunately, both NASA and Northrop Grumman, who's the contractor, have a lot of experience
Yeah.
with this kind of thing. This is the people building this are the Northrop Grumman out in Redondo Beach,
Okay.
California. They used to be TRW.
Oh,
They've done a lot of big, complicated programs.
right.
Not all the technology is theirs. A lot of it comes from other places, but they put it all together under NASA's supervision.
Yeah.
So I'm part of that big team of people that is supervising what Northrop Grumman is doing and checking that all the T's are crossed and all the I's are dotted.
Are you going to go to the launch?
Probably not.
Oh, bummer. I saw the Viking launches when I was young. Both.
Well, this will be down in French Guiana.
It would be French Guiana.
There's probably going to be a limited audience. Not being a big shot, I don't think I'm going to go. And not only that, but by that time I will probably move on to another assignment, because once we mount on the rocket and get it rolled out there, I think I'm probably done with this program. That is the decision point is called there's a pre-ship review, which is the review that we have before we take this thing and send it out to French Guiana. Then there's a launch readiness and a mission readiness review. NASA loves reviews. NASA has tons of reviews. NASA's just all about reviews. And we will the tonnage of PowerPoint charts generated for this thing will be could cause the Earth to collapse into a black hole. It's just so much stuff, and part of my job is going to be generate some of that stuff, and just a tiny, a small fraction of it, and people with a much higher pay grade than mine will stand up there and say, "Yeah, we're ready to go," and I really hope that, knowing these people, if they say that, they really are ready to go, because they do not want to. They're not going to get go fever. It's not going to be like Challenger.
Yeah.
We got to go. We got to go. We got to launch no matter what. No, it's going to be like, we'll launch when we're sure it's fine. And and you know that will be so yeah. That's the Goddard way of doing things. It's expensive, but they have a very good track record of getting of successful missions. So
Well, I hope those aren't just famous last words. I do think that we may be entering an era where many small missions are going to trump huge single launches like this.
yeah, but I mean,
we'll see.
Nobody has the technology yet to do a big telescope, you know, distributed. That would
No,
be
that's not quite true. Certainly in radio, the idea of doing an interferometer with multiple spacecraft is
well, yeah, I would agree.
interesting. And
Radio that's you know with wavelengths on the order of millimeters or centimeters, that is definitely doable.
well, you got to start somewhere. Got to go there, and then just see what you can do with it.
Yeah.
But I mean,
I think the
there are,
Russians have launched a radio interferometry mission, which is sort of a demonstrator, but I think it did get enough good results that they liked it. But
yeah, and the gravitational wave demonstration mission worked out pretty well too. So
at least a Pathfinder, yeah.
Yeah, so hopefully that is the go as well.
Well, that demonstrated a key piece of the technology,
right?
But not all of it. I mean,
it was so tiny that you couldn't do all of it. But
yeah, I think
so
at least a Pathfinder that's a good example of not spending a ton of money and getting a really good result. But
right.
The problem is we haven't figured out how to do, even at infrared wavelengths, we haven't figured out how to do distributed telescopes yet. Now, maybe I can see 30, 40 years from now, that might be the way to go.
Well, you could also start to get to the point where you could do assembly in space or assembly on the far side of the moon, and that could be multiple missions to put together an installation. So
yeah, I mean, absolutely. In fact, the huge constraint on James Webb, what made James Webb so damn hard to do, was that it can't be assembled in space,
and it can't be repaired, and therefore everything has to be perfect the first time. That's you know, if you knew you could launch a repair mission, you'd probably be up there by now.
Yeah. And probably need to launch a repair mission.
That's right. You just budget that right in.
Well, trust me, there are people at Goddard who think that's the way to go.
Well, that's kind of what I'm saying is that the idea of fail fast, go for smaller missions, but still be smart and find ways to combine it to get your powerful instruments. Yeah. That's going to be, I think that's going to be one of the lessons from the James Webb is going to be, okay, we've got to rethink these stupendous projects and not abandon the hope to do them, but just look for some new kinds of ways to accomplish them.
Yeah, well, I think that you're probably right about that. And ultimately, if we're going to build a really, really massive telescope in space, we're going to have to assemble it in space. Whether it's interferometers or whether it's just one big mirror, the technology does not exist yet. But
well, the other one that's fun, have you read about this one? It's the idea is to have not the largest telescope, but a reasonable sized telescope. But then far, far, far away from the telescope, you have another element that acts as a star shade.
Yeah, well, that was Terrestrial Planet Finder. It got canceled back a number of years ago.
Right. So that's another example of taking multiple spacecraft and using them in conjunction. Yeah. That's pretty interesting.
That was, I thought, was basically a casualty of James Webb Space Telescope. The money that went into, was taken from that. Now, Terrestrial Planet Finder is a great idea, and hopefully we'll take it up again when the smoke clears.
Right.
I mean, Lisa is a similar idea, having distributed spacecraft that can. Now, Lisa's doing a very different thing
Of course.
uh,
Yes.
and it's looking for very long wavelength gravity waves.
Which is exciting.
But the you know, Lisa is going to take some really heroic technological work still. I mean, the Pathfinder was impressive, but there's a lot more that has to be done.
Mhm.
And you know, I hope, you know, and the U.S. bailed from that and then said, oh, we want to get back in on Pathfinder. And then, you know, so, because Europeans have been leading that primarily. So we may get, the U.S. may get back in on Lisa. I don't know. Launch costs have come down a lot. Even ULA's offering cheaper launches now. Because they saw that Falcon Heavy could launch for cheaper than their cheapest launch. They said, well, we've got to get our launches down in cost. I don't know how they did it, but they have reduced their prices.
Competition's a wonderful thing.
It is. And, you know, New Glenn is not very far away. So that's Jeff Bezos' launcher. Jeff Bezos has more free cash to spend than the U.S. government. So certainly more than NASA. So he's developed this. He sells every year. He sells about $1 billion of Amazon stock to pay for Blue Origin.
I think his wife might have more free cash than NASA. His ex-wife.
His ex-wife. Yeah, she's doing quite well. You know, I'm sure she'll do a lot of charitable work, but because when you have that much money, there's, you know, you can only buy so many mega mansions. But
well, Bezos did give her more money so he could keep 100% of his space ventures.
Yeah,
so she won't be sitting on those boards for what it's worth.
But the Amazon stock it's been punching to the stratosphere lately, so
yep.
He's doing well, and he's got all this cash, and well, he can have as much cash as he wants, and he can't sell all the stock at once because it would crash the price, but he can sort of.
Well, you know, he's kind of gone all the way around the corner when you find out that he's opening brick and mortar bookstores now.
Which I'm happy about. I miss brick and mortar bookstores.
I know, but it's just so funny.
Well, we've got a Barnes and Noble about 8 miles away from my house. That's about the best I can do. But we used to have one right nearby, and it's, you know, it was a Borders. It's long gone. It was sad watching Borders decline to, you know, go through their period where they were desperate to save themselves, and then just giving up. But you know, yeah, I'd love to, well, we have, you know, what is thriving though is secondhand bookstores. And,
oh yeah.
And places where you can go and just browse endlessly through these stacks of unpredictable books. I love that. It's fun, and people. I'm not the only one that enjoys that. Other people enjoy that, and those bookstores are not big. They don't spend a lot of money. They don't.
Oh no, in Austin they're big.
Yeah, well,
you have a chain in Austin of half-price bookstores, and they're all huge stores.
Yeah, well, I was
so it's big in Austin for what it's worth.
I've been in some tiny ones, you know, places like Asheville, North Carolina, and Yellow Springs, Ohio, and we got one in Rockville I haven't been to yet, but Rockville, Maryland, but it looks good. But you just wander through there, and they got the books sort of loosely organized into type of book, but you just sort of wander through the science fiction section and say, "Oh man, I didn't know that guy was. Books were still available. Oh, they're not. They're all out of print. But you can grab a couple of them here, you know, and you know, it's fun. And you come home with a stack of books you won't read for 3 years, but you know, that's I think a lot. I'm not the only one that enjoys that. And they'll have things like, they'll have graphic novels and comic books and old CDs and old vinyl records, and you just people like me just enjoy browsing for that kind of thing. Yeah. So I think Bezos is actually, he's on there something. We need to go back to brick and mortar, because people like going places and drinking coffee and looking at books. And I used to take my kids to Borders all the time, and I get them a hot chocolate in the coffee shop. And then after they'd been through the kids section, and we'd picked out 3 or 4 books, and we'd take them home, and I'd have to read each one 50 times at least, at a minimum. Some of them a lot more than 50. Dr. Seuss's A Sleep book, I think I had to read about 300 times. But those days are long past. But long past. Well, I have a college freshman now and a high school sophomore.
I was shocked to learn that somebody actually came up with a substance recently and decided to name it oobleck, which is one of Dr. Seuss's inventions from one of his stories. You should check it out if you aren't familiar with this oobleck stuff. It's pretty amazing.
What is that?
Oobleck. It was from Dr. Seuss's story about.
Yeah, I'm sorry. Yeah, I got that. But what kind of product is oobleck? I can't.
I would have to Google to remind myself. Hang on.
Some sort of slime. It's non-Newtonian fluid. Yeah. Yeah.
Oobleck. I definitely remember an oobleck.
Actually, it's got a page for it.
Yeah, in the story, of course, it was just a green slime that came from the sky, which was.
It's made of.
That's not what this is. This is non-Newtonian fluid.
Yeah, yeah.
The oobleck. Yeah. Okay.
It's just like when I found out about it, I was blown away because it was pretty cool.
Now, book. I don't think I have that. We have that book or had that book. Because 1949. Okay. It was probably out of print when I was a child, which was in the early 60s, late 50s.
Right.
And my kids I never read it to my kids, but it does look, the name oobleck does look familiar. And now there's somebody makes this product called oobleck. Oh, awesome. Yeah. We certainly read a lot of Dr. Seuss. I mean, one challenge I've never succeeded at was getting through Fox and Socks without making a mistake.
So did you see this note from Sam that he wanted to get in?
Oh, Sam. Yeah. Sorry.
I think Sam is online.
Sorry, Sam. I didn't.
No video though.
I did not see. I wasn't looking at the participants thing.
No worries.
I got to fix that so people can just get in wherever they want.
Hey, where's your video, Sam?
Let's see. Is that working now?
There you are. I see you.
How are you guys?
Hey, what are you
Good. How are you doing, Sam?
Not
Yeah,
bad.
we're just chatting about Dr. Seuss and the James Webb Space Telescope, and what else?
And Beetlejuice.
Beetlejuice or Beetlejuice?
I didn't even know-
I think I prefer
realize
Beetlejuice.
I
Dr.
think
Seuss
I
was
like
a-
Beetlejuice better.
Was Dr. Seuss a PhD in astronomy? Is that why he's Dr. Seuss?
Oh yeah, that's right. He had a
Think of
well.
that.
I know. There was I don't remember how we got on. We were talking about Jeff Bezos,
in books.
and then somebody mentioned he was started putting brick and mortar Amazon stores, and then something about I was reminiscing about the old brick and mortar stores where I used to buy my kids' Dr. Seuss books,
Mm-hmm.
and then Dr. Seuss. So we're being very ADHD tonight.
No, nothing wrong with that.
Yeah, we haven't gotten to SETI or METI at all yet.
Mhm.
Although I saw an interesting paper just today about somebody, basically the paper was saying kind of the obvious thought that if we find lots of exobiology, but we don't find any technosignatures, that's kind of a bad thing from a Fermi perspective.
Well, I
Just-
mean, if
How-
I would fully expect we could find more biosignatures than technosignatures.
Right, but he did the math. Like, how many biosignatures would we have to find without any technosignatures before we have to be worried that the filter's ahead of us and not behind us? That's what the paper was about.
Oh,
I'll send.
well,
I'll
but we're
post the
we're
link.
already
It's pretty
capable of
interesting.
producing technosignatures, so I would think the filter would be behind us.
No,
So,
the question is how many technosignatures we find out there.
yeah, that's what I mean. But I mean, in terms of where we are relative to that.
No, I don't know. Well, yeah, I'll post the paper and you can see his point. But there could still be some great filters ahead of us. Come on, you know that.
Well, it could be. I'm skeptical about great filters in general, but I think the arguments for those are pretty fragile. But
Paul, did you already do some event Allow Signal Live on the Aurora effect paper that you linked?
no, we haven't done that yet, and I really want to. But the thing is, okay, here's the
I didn't
deal.
see it in the podcast feed.
I have been I've been through a lot of life disruption lately. I think I'm about
Mm-hmm.
done with that now. So I haven't really done a proper reading of that paper that I really feel I should do to interview the author.
You're
And
gonna get Jonathan.
Jonathan, yeah, well, he's one of the authors, but and there have been so many other papers coming along. I can't. Every week I get an email from the SETI Institute with new papers on SETI, and it's
Mhm.
like 10 or 11 of them every week.
It's just a flood right now, and it's probably only going to get worse.
In fact, Sophia Sheikh just put out another one.
Yeah, have you read that one? It was very good.
I have not read it.
It was a negative, but basically they looked for signals specifically from known planets, exoplanets, that would be able to see the Earth transit from their viewpoint.
Yeah, and I think that's a smart approach. Yeah, I think I understand the basic concept here. In fact, I think Seth Shostak talked about it many years ago.
Yeah, I
The idea
ran across one guy.
we look in the ecliptic, basically.
Right. Yeah, and I ran across one guy who claimed that he suggested that to Jill Tarter a couple of decades ago, and she kind of poo-pooed the idea. But back then we didn't have the large list of exoplanets that we have now, so there's the difference.
Yeah. Well, I think there are some, at least, there's some virtue to looking in the ecliptic. And
So anyway, they did 22 targets and they came out negative, but it was like that's a pretty good first step.
well, the thing is,
Well, is it just in the ecliptic, or is it like specifically at exoplanets which have the right angle relative to us, so that our Earth transits would include the solar disk from their
Yeah,
perspective?
well, that's pretty
it was
much the
latter.
ecliptic.
That's pretty much the ecliptic, but yeah, it's the latter.
Yeah. There's a very small range of angles around the ecliptic where that would be valid. Now, the thing is that at any given time, if we're going looking for technosignatures with a radio telescope, the likelihood of seeing them is tiny.
Yep.
So you have, because you have to assume that, there's a civilization there at the same time that we have one, which you know, we don't know how thin those slices are, but they're probably not that thick, and so you have to look at a whole bunch of them to get a meaningful negative result. And not only that, but most of the technical signatures we can see would all have to be deliberate transmissions. There's this is a civilization there that wants us to see them.
Just for power reasons?
Yeah, essentially, you get very far away. I mean, not even very far away. Like, and you need ridiculous amounts of power to for us to receive it with our current radio telescopes. Now, when the SKA comes fully online in a few years, that will be better. But you have to understand that probably there could be technical signatures buried in radio astronomy data that people rejected as noise, or just didn't even look at. They see a spike in their data, they'll say, "Oh, somebody's got their cell phone on next door, or somebody opened the microwave oven, or there's a satellite passing overhead," and they just they don't use that information. There could be some exceptions to that, and that's why the WOW signal is still of interest, because it's the one signal we know of that passes all the tests. Although back then we didn't have the technology and the resources to really test it hard. So
though, I mean, those tests, it's like, whatever instrument was used to do the observations, it has some sort of sensitivity level. And so it's distinguishing noise from signal, right? That's the fundamental issue.
And it's got to be a signal that's coming from a place out in the celestial sphere, not from something moving near Earth or something.
Maybe some things that are on fire make it more likely. Yeah.
Yeah, but
you want narrow band, because usually nature doesn't prefer narrow bands.
Nature doesn't do narrow band basically. Even natural masers are much wider band than what the WOW signal was.
The question I have about this is, basically, as radio telescopes improve, the passing the test becomes easier for a real signal, right? Because the level of noise that can be distinguished from the signal, I assume.
The problem is that terrestrial radio telescopes are still sensitive. If they're sensitive to one thing, they're sensitive to another, right? So
they're going
to be sensitive to all kinds of interference. It's
the question. So the question I was getting towards is, from if you're trying to figure out, related to Sophia's thing about the most efficient way to allocate SETI resources, is it more efficient to actually spend money to look now, or invest the money to improve radio telescopes and build, potentially, put it in a hedge fund or get
radio telescopes have improved by several orders of magnitude.
Right. So as they continue to improve, it gets easier and easier to find a signal. So should you actually just defer looking until they've improved even more?
I don't know, because you never know when that signal is going to hit. And some of the radio telescopes that we have now are sensitive enough to detect a deliberately sent signal.
Right. We could detect from most of the planets that we've discovered through transit and radio velocity, if they were sending us a signal at the same power we could transmit with like Arecibo, something like 50% of them we would be able to detect a signal.
Yeah.
I'm just asking.
We're kind of there. The thing that's improved more than the power of the signal detection and all that is that we can look in so many frequencies simultaneously now, and we couldn't do that 30 years ago.
Yeah.
And that's just compute power.
Compute power, and the receivers have gotten a lot better, but
the receivers are much better.
Yeah, but
does that make it also easier to reanalyze the old data or not? The compute power.
The thing is, the detection there was limited to specific frequencies.
Or they
So you
just
can't
weren't
go back and
observing.
redo those at
in
other
a lot of
frequencies.
cases, we don't even have digital data from the older
That's a
stuff.
good point.
We have strip charts or printouts.
Right.
In the case of the WOW signal, it was just a printout.
Mhm.
There was absolutely no digital record other than that.
And that
Right.
printout corresponds
When I
to-
did a little radio astronomy at Caltech, basically they said, well, we were looking for something with our radio telescope and we didn't find it, but here's this, thousands of pages of computer printout. Go calculate to what degree we didn't find it. That was no fun, but
Yeah, well, at least, something you can tell your grandkids about. Hey,
Right.
I used to sift through line printer printouts and look for data. You kids have it so easy.
Yeah, you had to walk uphill in the snow both ways to do that.
right.
When I tell my kids that, I grew up without a cell phone, it's like, oh my God, you poor thing. How did you survive?
There used to be boxes in the middle of the street where you could actually.
We've got a dial telephone down here in the basement that I showed to them, and it left by the previous owner. I said, "See this? This all the telephones were." And that, but yeah, I mean, the thing is with the more sensitive telescopes, one of the hopes is that you could eavesdrop instead of simply sending a deliberately sent signal, which is improbable, even if they want to send us a signal. Because we'd have to be looking at the same time they're transmitting. And the time scales we're talking about are big, but if you could eavesdrop, if you could detect like a radar or a deliberately or in some cases a laser transmission, then or I guess Avi Loeb has talked about detecting microwave power transmission. Just something like the Breakthrough Starshot. If they were doing a Breakthrough Starshot, we could maybe see it with optically or in microwave if it just pointed in the right direction towards us. And
or if they were doing ship-to-ship communications.
Yeah.
Or ground-to-ship communications.
Now these
like
days,
that.
even us apes, use a lot of spread spectrum techniques, very wideband stuff. Because we have to, because the spectrums can become so crowded. I mean, your cell phone does not transmit and receive on a single frequency. It's all over the place. And
that makes it harder to see for the eavesdropper, or easier?
Yeah, because it looks like noise unless you know what the code is and can follow it. They either use kind of phase chopping or frequency chopping to move it around, and this has been something that's been common for a long time because the military had to develop it to keep the bad guys from eavesdropping. So
actually, that goes back to that starlet, whatever her name was, Hedy Lamarr.
Yeah.
She actually invented the whole frequency skipping stuff.
Spread
cell phones use now, yeah.
Spread spec, which we use for everything now, because it avoids. It's better at keeping interference out, and it does a better job of when you're sharing frequencies with somebody else. So you're when you pop open your cell phone and look at 4G, it's not like you have your own frequency allocated to your phone.
Mm-hmm.
You're using the same frequencies that lots of other people are using.
Right. Well, so that's pretty bad news for the eavesdropping paradigm then.
It is, but there are some things that may be single frequency, like radar or power beaming.
Power beaming would be, yes. That's a good point. I still, however, I'm a big fan of the non-radio, non-laser techno signatures, and we haven't spent a lot of time looking for them yet. But they're out there. You know, you got things like McKelsey star, however you pronounce that.
Shabilsky's, yeah.
Shabilsky star. You've got the potential to put odd-shaped louvers or something in orbit to make transits that look strange. I've seen some theories that, you know, if you were closer to the center of the galaxy, there are certain things you could do by putting objects into strange orbits around a black hole or whatever that have the advantage that you could show that it was intelligent, you were intelligent, or someone was intelligent, but you wouldn't give away the location of your home star.
Ah, yeah.
So
well,
that's, you know,
yeah,
those
that's
are
one of
things
the-
to look for.
that's one of the big objections a lot of people have is maybe people or whatever they are afraid of revealing their location. I think actually there was an XKCD comic about that. You know, Randall Munro, the great webcomic author, he did one where he posited there was like space sharks, and everybody's trying to be invisible to the space shark. Even if they don't exist, if you just posit they might exist, you still have to worry that, you know,
The old dark forest.
well, yeah, that or you know, there's what was that novel, The Berserkers, or a series of novels.
I think that was the dark forest. Yeah.
Yeah, this species that existed their only purpose was to wipe out all other life.
Right.
Now, to me, that doesn't sound very biologically plausible, but Douglas Adams had a species like that too. That the cricket species that wanted to kill all other intelligent beings in the galaxy, just because they didn't think they should be there.
Could an exobiological life form evolve in such a, or devolve, I should say, and degenerate to a point that it loses any meaning for existing other than the destruction of other
Well,
species?
yeah, the Daleks. Duh.
Well, I don't know what that is, but I'm not. But is that a Doctor Who thing? I
Yeah,
don't
that's
know.
another thing.
Yeah.
Okay, so the theory would be that your longest living intelligences might not be biological anymore. They would be mechanical in nature, and possibly at some point would forget that they were originally biological.
Right.
Yet they, and, you know, they're super long lived, and they are worried that someone else is going to create a competing technological, you know, thing. So they go out and kill all the biologicals or something. So I mean, that sounds like a plausible theory. I don't know.
Yeah, I mean, the cost of covering interstellar distances. If you assume that it's high, then it wouldn't be worth it.
Oh no, but Fermi showed that you could go around and visit the whole galaxy, you know, with shorter time frames than you would imagine at first.
Well, yeah, but I mean, assuming that, but you can't control that. I mean, once you start the colonization process, it's out of your control.
That's really true. Yeah.
So it can't be purposed like that. It has to be just keep going on its own steam. One thing that Jeff Landis showed back in, I think, in 1990. Well, he didn't show it so much as he posed the theoretical probability that once something gets just a few light years away, you can't control it anymore. It's going to do whatever it wants to do, based on whatever programming or desires or needs that it has. And when it gets to where it's going, its only priority is going to be to survive, and then if it can survive, then it can reproduce and make more of itself, and and move on. But that's a massive project. So in some cases, it will evolve into something much more sedentary, something much more willing to stay put. And yeah, so there's a. I think there's a lot of possibilities. But I something like the Daleks, which are machine intelligence that just exists to exterminate other life, and does it badly, by the way. But it's probably not going to get out of science fiction, but it made for fun Doctor Who episodes. But these things couldn't even go upstairs.
You were mentioning the idea of using engineering exotic-looking transits as a way of signaling intelligence, Rock. So the question I have about that is, do you think that even, say, 30 years from now, people are still going to be using transits as their way of finding exoplanets? Like, those are the hot new thing. We've been doing it for 20 years now, right? It's pretty good, but maybe they'll be in a completely different paradigm.
Well, transits are only going to work for like 1 in 100, so you need some other techniques if you want to get a broad enough sample.
Yeah, so we're definitely going to be working on finding new techniques. And
there are other techniques.
100 years from now, transits might seem like a very quaint thing to even be thinking about because they're so...
Yeah, but right now we use supernova, far-flung supernova as our distance ladder for the furthest parts of the universe. But that doesn't obviate the work that was done with Cepheid variables early on. So yeah, I think it'll be kind of similar. We're going to learn enough from the planets we discover through transit to help us do a better job of detecting them in other ways in the future, I would think.
But like, you think that a putative ETI, potentially millions of years more advanced than us, would think that we might be looking for transits, and therefore their model of us as a way of signaling their presence to us might be transit oriented. It just seems like, what if the phase when transits are all people can look for is such a tiny little bit of an intelligent civilization's history that it's kind of a stupid thing to target as your way of messaging to other intelligence.
Well, not only that, I mean, that's a good point, but I'll go further than that. Our solar system is not a particularly easy one to spot using the transit mechanism compared to the typical one that we have found so far. Now, that doesn't necessarily mean that, there's this huge bias effect. The ones we've found so far are the easy ones to find, i.e. ones that have hot Jupiters that are close in, right? Mm-hmm. Those predominate in the transit mechanism. And we don't know for a fact that those predominate overall, but we know they're pretty darn common by now. And yet, if you think about it, our big planet that would transit the largest, Jupiter and Saturn, they take many, many years to go around the star instead of just a handful of days like the hot Jupiters. So that's a totally different problem. I think you would have to be studying our solar system for a good 25 years before you could be sure that you'd actually discovered planets like the Earth and Mars and Jupiter and what have you.
And that would only be if you're in the right geometry. I mean,
and yes, you're in the right geometry, of course. Yeah.
We're very anthropocentric about this. 25 years might just be a blink of an eye for some.
Yeah.
Other.
Well, I mean, yeah. We've done really the only serious project has been Kepler, and now TESS. But TESS really has a short viewing period of each part of the sky it looks at. So TESS is a statistical exercise. TESS is going to say, okay, I saw what I think is a transit, but it's not going to see it repeat. It's going to move on to some other part of the sky. So ground telescopes have to get involved and look for the next transit.
Well, that's true, but there is a little caveat. There are a couple of caveats with TESS. One is it will come back around to the same section of sky again later.
Yeah, but for a couple months.
But also, there is an area where all of those slices do pile up and overlap. So there is an area, and I think it's larger than the Kepler area, where we're going to get as much data as Kepler, or on the order of as much data as Kepler.
Yeah, if it repeats enough
test.
times, yes, it will do that.
No. It's not a matter of the slices. I'm talking about the tail end of each slice has some overlap, so that every slice has a small portion of it that is part of this repeated circle where the slices all come together. It's the geometry of what it's doing.
Well, the slices come together, but not the particular viewing areas. So,
no, the viewing areas overlap from slice to slice, a small amount, and that small amount will have fairly continuous coverage a la Kepler.
Is that
Now, it's not going to be the whole sky. It's not going to be the whole sky that way, but there's a portion of the sky that's going to have that effect.
Is it a good portion? Is it the portion you would pick?
I think it's in the southern hemisphere. I don't know if you could pick. Kepler was chosen because they wanted something with a lot of stars, but not too close to the galactic center, where it would be just too much to track.
right.
I don't know. I'm not sure. To answer your question, I'd have to look at that. I haven't really thought of it from that standpoint.
Yeah, well,
but
right now they're in the northern hemisphere, and that they're going to go back to the southern hemisphere. I think I'm not sure exactly when. Probably in a few months. But the thing is, the continuous staring at one spot that may not happen for a long time.
Yeah.
Plato.
However, Kepler was a fairly inexpensive project, so it is entirely possible that we could see somebody put some funding together to do like a dozen Kepler-style missions or more, which would be very cool.
Yeah, I think if you could get telescopes on the moon, you could do lots of Keplers. The problem is you have to do above the atmosphere so you can see those very subtle variations in the brightness.
By the way,
I don't think the moon would be as easy as Kepler. Kepler could really stay still.
That's true. I mean, but
the moon has moonquakes and it has, its orbital dynamics and so
I think
forth.
you could figure that out.
I guess so.
The main thing is just something. Kepler was an orbit around the sun, you're right. It wasn't a terribly expensive mission.
$700 million total, including the extended mission.
Say again?
$700 million, including the extended.
Right.
Yeah, that's actually, considering the number of years that it went on, that's pretty good. The spacecraft itself was not.
Right, you wouldn't have to redo the research and development either, so they're going to be cheaper going forward.
Oh no, I'm sorry. There's no way to not redo it. That's how things like that happen. The science community gets a hold of them. They'll redo everything, but still, I mean,
not every time.
spacecraft.
I'm sure that's true at NASA, but it's not true everywhere.
The telescope itself was not the expensive part, and if you could build several of them, you could do that. But I mean, statistically, it certainly achieved its purpose, and I think TESS is achieving its purpose in terms of compiling the statistics.
Right, but think about it. Think about my point about our solar system would take 25 years to detect. We have not put up a technology that could detect our solar system.
Well, yeah, but I mean,
Kepler wasn't designed to last that long.
No, but Kepler reserved for about 3.5-4 years, with some breaks. If that, you could have seen theoretically 3 or 4 transits from the Earth if you were close enough. Now, you need they
didn't find too many planets the size of the Earth. Most of the planets they found were several times larger than the Earth or larger.
Yeah, well, that makes sense. You would expect that bias, because first of all, a bigger planet is going to have a bigger dip, and secondly, you know, even our size star is big enough that the dip's going to be pretty subtle.
Right.
And if you're looking, but that's one thing that Plato would be looking for would be transits around Earth-sized, I mean, sun type, solar type stars, and you know, so that's going up. I think in about 3 years. I'm going by memory there. About
2026.
2026. Okay, well, 6 years, which on
So Sam,
on ESA time, that's pretty good.
So Sam, we did mention the other longer term technique that gets us away from transits, which is you put up a modest sized telescope, but then you also put up another element called a star shade that is positioned far, far, far away from the telescope.
Mm-hmm.
And you line those two up so that the star shade is blocking the light of the star and allowing you a chance then to see the stuff around the star.
Yeah, I've heard of that. I don't know the extent to which this has been done, or if it's.
It has
hasn't
not been
done. Not been done.
Although WFIRST will have a coronagraph, it's going to be relatively crude compared to what you could do if something was a long way away.
But that's still very exciting. It's one of the more exciting things about WFIRST, I think, the coronagraph element. Yes.
But is that really the way you'd scale this up to like the next level? Is like you'd have some massive solar system scale fleet of telescopes and solar shields?
Well, we could look at stars that are not presenting to us from a transit direction. So if the planets are rotating around, say we're coming in and looking at that solar system from their North Pole, we have the opportunity to identify several planets, with just a small series of photographs. So it's kind of exciting. It's plausible.
There's still a luck, right? You need the solar shield to be lined up with the star you're observing just right.
It's tricky.
Yeah. It's tricky. Yes, it's technologically challenging,
but it's plausible.
But it, roughly speaking, gets better and easier the further away you can put the shield.
Well, you block the light better. Yeah.
So like opposite ends of the Earth's orbit would be good, for example.
Well, no, further than that.
Yeah, you'd want it. Yeah, ideally, you would park this sucker out past the asteroid belt or further. And you might even want to have to. You realistically, you'd have one telescope and a whole fleet of star shades, which are constantly repositioning to different places. And then you'd be looking at one, and then one of the others will get in position, and you switch to it, and so forth. That's realistically
how it looks. 100-year time scale for when we could expect this type of advance.
Well, it was funded several years ago to try to do a pilot program like that. That funding got taken away. So we're probably looking 15, 20 years down the road.
Yeah, it's a decade or so to get started, but it's, you're asking the question, how do we get away from just transits? And, other than the radio velocity method, which is also quite good right now, that's the other one that I think is exciting.
Yeah, occultations are too short.
A lot of large numbers working on your side. So you have to be pointing, you really need lots of these telescopes, not like a dozen Keplers. It's a little bit better than one Kepler, but it's not like game-changingly better, and I assume the same thing is still true for these other techniques as well.
Yeah,
you sort of want coverage across as large a field of view as you can for as long as consistently as you can with the best observation technology you can get. So
well, transits are going to see a few percent of the planets, so it's purely to gather statistics.
Right. We're just very fortunate that there are as many planets as there are, apparently, because the transit, if we lived in a galaxy or a universe where planets were fairly rare, then Kepler wouldn't have brought home so many planets. But the fact that, the Kepler has done as well as it has.
Right. But if you want really good
there's more planets than stars out there.
If we want really good statistics, then we need you really want something like a self-replicating fleet of Keplers, which you
Well, to be honest, to be totally honest with you, you need about 7 or 8 different techniques for finding planets to get a non-biased sample of what's really out there, because all of the techniques you can come up with have biases. And so you need multiple techniques to have any hope of getting around those biases ultimately.
or just incredibly large sample sizes, right?
No. It's if your technique is incredibly large, but it has a very strong selection effects, you're still beholden to those selection effects.
Yeah, for example, the radial velocity method, it overwhelmingly biased to detect big planets in close to the star. It will not detect at all small planets at like Earth distances from the star. And that could change if you get really, really super sensitive radial velocities. But
actually,
people
the
have worked on that so hard, and they've not really got it much better.
Well, the thing is, we're going to get close to the point where the variability of the photosphere, or the equivalent, the stellar photospheres, the variability of those layers will have a certain speed in terms of stars fluffing up and getting larger and smaller just in the normal course of being a star. And that signal can overwhelm most planetary signals.
Yeah, you'd have to understand the stars super well to take that out.
Exactly. And it's not very likely we'd ever get to that point. So yeah, I mean, you do need a lot of different techniques. And in fact, there's a very interesting conference down in Australia this summer where they're taking the data from about 7 different techniques, and they're going to try to come up with a cut about, okay, how do we take these different techniques with all their different selection effects and start to take a first stab about what's really out there. And I think we're just getting to the point where we can start that exercise now. But the math on it's pretty heavy duty. Statistics is a bear.
There's a lot of noise.
Yeah.
Well, all you can do is keep getting better at it.
I will say, just the first blush really does make it look like our solar system is really an odd place.
Yeah,
well, exactly as you say, though. The potential bias makes that a hard thing to say.
It's hard, but it's just if you go with, the initial, let me put it this way. 20 years ago, we were thinking about these problems and we had no planets to look at. And if you had told people 20 years ago that you would see the kinds of solar systems we're seeing mostly, they wouldn't have believed you.
That's true. And, hot Jupiters were a total surprise.
Yeah.
Although now people think they understand them theoretically, more or less.
That's what I would call a retrodiction rather than a prediction, right?
Exactly.
Well, I mean, you see the new data and you figure you improve the theory, but we see so many of these planets is so tight that you got to figure, well, okay, there's some common mechanism whereby these big planets migrate in and don't get pushed back out. And what happened in our solar system was they migrated in maybe a ways and then came back out, and that may be rare.
I saw one.
Do you know how they know that? How do they know the history of our solar system in that particular way?
Well, most it's done through modeling and simulation. And the paper I saw recently that tried to come up with an explanation of why Jupiter didn't migrate in basically thanked Saturn for pulling it out.
Yeah, that's I think that's getting close to the consensus.
Yeah.
The modeling's getting better. I mean, now they have more data to work with. They have.
Well, understand you say that, but of course, understand that they're still just trying to figure out the very initial stages of planetary formation, how that works.
Well, that's one thing JWST
we only have one solar system thing. If you have some n-body simulation model, right? you can sort of vary the parameters and say how things might behave in general. And that definitely seems like a way to learn about how solar systems form and evolve as a statistical matter, averaging, looking across a population of many solar systems. But what I guess I'm not clear on is how do they validate that their model gives, like, what's the sort of out of sample test that says this model of our specific solar system is better than that other model of our specific solar system, right?
Yeah, so they run these models, millions of times, and then play statistical games with how often do you come up with a solar system that looks like this or that or the other. And so that's the way you have to do it these days. Is your model has to be simple enough so that you can just run it a huge number of times and then do sampling or statistical analysis on your multiple results. If your
if Venus crashes into Mercury, that's probably I had the parameters wrong.
No, it's like, oops, that's going to happen 1 out of 1,000 times.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah, right.
But we don't know. We could be a rare case, right? It's
looking to me like maybe we are. Yes.
Yeah. Well, the thing is, you don't know what the initial conditions were exactly, so you have
right.
to, and it could turn out to be very sensitive to that.
A lot of these, I think, typically these n-body things are extremely sensitive to initial conditions, right?
That's correct.
Quintessential example of chaotic systems, right?
Right.
Yeah.
Well, I mean, our solar system's chaotic, and there's a fairly large % chance that the inner solar system is just going to go kablooey long before the sun goes red giant.
Like you say, a fairly large chance. Saying
fairly large chance.
A large fraction of model runs of some class of models have this property. And
yes,
but
exactly.
As an epistemological matter, translating that into a sort of actual probability strikes me as,
it's just a math problem, and people do those math problems, and they publish papers, and they get PhDs for them. So what can I say?
So the math problem gives you a theorem about properties of the model. And then there's a physics.
Well, it's always good to predict things that you will never know the actual answer to, because then you can't be proven wrong, right?
Well, that's the great thing about all these new solar systems we have. We know that our models have to be able
to describe them
to match those as well.
Yes,
right.
And but I was talked to Dave Grinspoon a couple of years ago. He said, "Look, we've looked at the climate models for Venus and the climate models for Earth, and they don't match up. You can't move one to the other. You can't take the Venus climate models and make them work for Earth, or Earth climate models make them work for Venus. So we have a lot to learn yet. And, these are two planets that are right next door to each other and have very different climate outcomes. And, there's, it's not a simplistic, here's how much sunlight's falling on Venus sort of thing. There's a lot of very complex factors that weigh into that. And
although, it is true that you can probably not a real climate model that's, doing a dynamic analysis of the differential equations of the various fluids, but sort of very cartoony energy balance type things. There's this much solar radiation coming in, the typical atmospheric concentration of these chemicals. We know what their emissions and absorption spectrum are, and you can sort of
those concentrations are sensitive to the conditions.
It's true,
and they change. They're dynamic.
But at the very basic level, it is. You would hope that you could sort of looking at Venus might actually teach you, or at least validate some of the things from Earth. But maybe that's not true. I don't know.
Yeah, well, that was what David Grinspoon was saying, was if we can't take the Earth climate models and make them work for Venus, we know we have work to do on the Earth climate models. Not that they're bad, not that they're hopeless, but they could be better.
Mm-hmm.
They're good enough. They're decent models, but
we don't have the data to build a Venus model, right? We don't have like grid scale.
Well, we don't have as much data, but we do know a lot about the current conditions of Venus. And, the question comes in, how do you get from what we thought the primordial Venus was to current?
Mm-hmm.
to do that, you have to model. The Venus modelers have an idea, but the Earth modelers can't replicate it.
Yeah.
So,
I mean, I'm less interested in Venus, but the case of the Martian atmosphere boiling off, that's a more interesting one to me because
well, Venus is a
That
lot
one
bigger.
actually, that one models pretty easily and pretty well. I think that one people feel they have a pretty good understanding of it. In fact, the interesting thing is you can get in those models now, they can actually tell that Mars did have a fairly good magnetic field at one point, and they can model for how long it kept that magnetic field before it lost it. So I have a lot more trust in the Mars models in terms of its atmosphere than I do in the Venus models.
Yeah, I
right
think
now.
what happened to Mars was relatively simple.
Yeah.
but if we really understand it, then we can reverse it, and that'll be an experimental test.
Well, no, actually, because to reverse it, you got to put a huge amount of mass in the core of Mars and make it much more massive to have any hope of rekindling the magnetic effect there. And I don't know if anybody has a good plan for doing that without wrecking the planet.
Daleks.
Yeah, I don't think terraforming Mars is going to lead it to as much edification as potentially terraforming Venus.
Venus has some potential, but you'd have to. We don't know how to do it yet, but Venus has now the funny thing with Venus, it has this incredibly slow rotation. It's just
right. It's
it's possible, for example, to build an airplane that could fly up high in the atmosphere of Venus, and it'd be solar powered, and it'd be in the sun for hundreds of days without having to to change its location very much.
Paul, I was kind of, I'm sure you saw the 4 missions that were selected for the next phase.
Yeah. Two of them were Venus.
And to be honest with you, I was kind of disappointed with both of the Venus missions. Now, I know Grinsberg's involved with one of them, but I would like a lot more focus on the atmosphere and not so much focus on the land and on Venus. I think some very interesting stuff might be happening in the atmosphere, and I'm dead curious about it. And I don't think
one of them is very focused on the atmosphere. So
no, I don't think either one of them is particularly focused on the atmosphere. One of them has an element of it that's doing some stuff in the atmosphere, but I don't think really studying and sampling the atmosphere is a big priority for those 2 missions, which is very disappointing to me.
The Vinci is an atmospheric probe.
The problem is these are discovery missions. So the funding is kind of minor, kind of small.
I know, and maybe the kind of thing I want to see is not feasible with that kind of budget. That's
the kind of thing I think is
possible,
probably 2 or 3 times that much money.
You may be right, but I mean, it would be something I'd ask Grinsberg about if I ever got the chance.
Grinspoon?
Grinspoon, yeah.
Yeah, well, maybe we'll get him on.
Yeah.
I haven't had him on in over a year.
Right.
He's been writing books lately, but he also is keeping one foot in the Venus science community.
No, he's involved with one of those projects.
Yeah, I know. He's
I think they're going to be paying his salary, so he's going to be very involved.
if it gets funded fully.
Well, they got $3 million for the next phase.
Oh,
so
that's.
I know, but I think he's part of the team. I think
he is. Yeah, but $3 million won't. That's not a marching army.
No, but that's just for the science team to do the next deep dive on the project. I don't know. Maybe we could twist his arm and have him do some more atmosphere
it's
stuff.
It's unbelievable how fast you can spend $3 million in a NASA program.
Well, of course.
The payload for the Da Vinci mission is a mass spectrometer, a laser spectrometer, structure investigative tool, and a descent imager. I'm sorry.
Descent imager, yeah. Well, I mean, if you could get a better profile of the atmosphere, even if it's a relatively cheap one, the next, with modern technology, the next step is to go explore some layer of the atmosphere.
Yeah.
And with an airplane or a balloon or those are basically the two options. A solar powered plane or some kind of solar powered balloon.
Quadcopter?
A what?
Copter?
Quadcopter, yeah.
Well, yeah, maybe. I mean, there's going to be a quadcopter on Venus. On Titan. So if you can put one on Titan, Venus should be easy.
But probably using a lifting body is better in terms of energy. Like you're not going to have great power inside the Venusian atmosphere, right? You won't have solar.
Well, no, it depends on how high up you are, but you could get a fair bit of sunlight. And
Titan's is technically a hopper, and that would not be what we want to do on Venus. We just want to stay in the atmosphere.
No, you don't want.
Venus.
Yeah, I know, but Titan is a hopper. That's true.
Yeah.
You could no. The thing is, because of Venus's very slow rotation speed, you can stay in one place, and night doesn't come for a very long time, and you can actually outrun nighttime.
So that's good for solar power.
Yeah, that would kind of like limit your mission. Just go for one Venetian day. That's a pretty good mission.
That's not too bad, but you could actually, because it's so slow, you could actually stay up with the sun, and even with like a quadcopter, and stay, keep sun on yourself without the batteries could be quite small.
So what's going to be interesting, there is a very temperate layer in the Venetian atmosphere, and that in some respects, in my mind, that's the most interesting place to look. But what I don't know off the top of my head is what are the wind profiles at that particular layer? Are they as harsh as they are on the ground, or are they a good bit less so?
I don't know if we know that yet. There could be some radar data that might spread light on that, but that would be one of the things they'd have to study. But if you could if you can figure out where the from the cloud patterns we've seen with the other missions, you can probably figure out where sort of the analog to the jet stream is and stay away from that. Because you don't want to get pushed over to the night side.
So is the smart money that one of the Venus missions is likely to win the exploration?
Well, 50-50 chance. There's 4 missions, and 2 of them will make it to the next phase, and either 1 or 2 will get launched.
The fact that they picked 2 strongly suggests they're going to pick 1.
Yes, I agree.
For the final, and $3 million is what they spend in a day at NASA headquarters. So, so it's really nothing, but it's enough to get a small science team to put together a bit more definition than what they have now, and they will. I think they'll pick one of them. Which one? They already have a set of criteria that they've defined, and a lot of it has to do with the risk involved. What's the risk of getting good data from the money we're going to spend, and or how mature is the technology, that sort of thing. Now, but the fact that
there's the rarity of the launch window is also another factor for some of them.
Well, that's why the mission to Neptune looks so interesting, is because there is a launch window aspect that they would be trying to hit. Yeah,
but Venus is easy,
relatively easy. It's actually expensive in fuel. It's surprisingly expensive in fuel.
Yeah, but
there's no big considerations about launch windows. That's true.
Yeah, you get lots of opportunities for Venus, which you don't. The bigger planets, the further out planets, the launch windows can be a little bit harder to come by, depending on your approach. I think that my guess is it'll be one of the Venus missions, and it will be that Triton flyby.
You don't like volcanoes?
Oh, actually, interestingly enough, all 4 of these missions will have something to do with volcanoes in some manner.
I thought the Jupiter one is the volcano one.
It's going to have, Io is the most intense in terms of volcanoes, but Triton has volcanoes, and there's volcanic activity to be investigated in Venus too.
Cryovolcanoes are a poor man's
So you
volcano.
can't, if you're a volcanologist, you got to be very happy with these 4 missions.
Yeah. True. Yeah. And but the only one that I'm aware of, the Samuel Delaney mission, Samuel Delaney novel is about his Triton. So, you know, that will hopefully revive some interest in his work. The first major African American science fiction novelist, but
Is it before Octavia Butler?
Yeah,
Say-
Delaney, he was like back in the early 70s, I think. Something like that.
Octavia Butler, wasn't she the 60s? I could be wrong.
oh, you might be right.
But sorry, I missed it. What does Delaney have to do with
Well,
Triton?
Samuel Delaney wrote a novel based on Triton.
I've-
It's very weird.
I've heard that all of his books are weird. They don't have the
Okay.
impression, the reputation of being very readable, so I've never really tackled them. But
Yeah,
He
well,
was
they're
a-
kind of like, yeah, you have to invest the time. Delaney is, but Delaney's invents these weird worlds, and he puts them on different places. But Triton is pretty weird. But when I was a teenager and reading it, I thought, well, this is great because it's like so weird. And my world in East Texas was not so weird.
1976. Wow. 1976 novel, science fiction novel,
Yeah,
an ambiguous heterotopia, Trouble on Triton, by Samuel Delaney. Wow.
yeah, it was.
it-
There's a protagonist who has a sex change operation. There's street theater. There's, I can't remember everything about in the novel, but it was just like, I remember in Triton you could pick your own government, whichever government you wanted, you could have that one. It was it was great. I mean, it's all these weird ideas. I don't know why he picked Triton. Actually, he just wanted it to be far away from Earth.
Probably the alliteration was too good.
Yeah, he liked that too. I'm sure.
Actually, he did write in the 50s, didn't he?
I believe so. Yeah,
Yeah, I think he goes back to the
50s
golden
to the
era.
70s, or
Yeah, so I
Uh,
guess he is before Butler a bit. So
he was. I know a guy who knew him, and I should ask him more about it, but because they were all part of that Greenwich Village sort of.
he was definitely amongst the Golden Agers and the ones who just followed the Golden Agers. He was pretty far out, that's for sure.
Yeah, well,
I like that a lot.
I recommend it if you want to spend like many days immersed in some strangeness.
He has plenty of short stuff that you can get into.
Yeah.
You don't have to go for the hardcore novels.
Oh, he's 77 years old, still living. Yeah.
Oh,
Delaney.
he's alive?
Yeah.
I thought he was dead. Maybe I
No.
was mistaken.
April,
Butler's dead.
he was
Butler
born
died
in
quite young.
42. Still alive, right? Yeah, think so.
Yeah. But there's so many ideas in his novels that are just like strange and weird and yet not entirely implausible.
He wrote the Wonder Woman comics in 1972.
Yeah, that's interesting.
Well, Robert Heinlein used to write nurse novels just to make a living, till he got his foothold in science fiction. So people write all kinds of things. Anyway,
Yeah, I'm gonna sign off. I think.
I'm gonna wrap this up soon. I've enjoyed it very much.
Nice talking to you
fun.
guys.
I hope we can get this is for the WoW Signal pub #1. It's about the right size and the right duration. So thanks for showing up, and maybe we'll do another one in like a couple months. Maybe April or May. So stay tuned.
Yep. Have a good night, guys.
All right,
care.
everybody. Good
See you
night.
guys.
I'm going to end the meeting now. Bye-bye.
Good night.